Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Andrea. Good morning.
Hello, Alison. Good morning.
Ciao. It's afternoon here. It's very nice. I've got the back door open, so I'm hoping that no one will come and make loud noises outside the back door, and I can keep it open while we're recording, hopefully. So,
all right. So in Italy, do you say buon pomeriggio?
Yeah.
Buon pomeriggio. Is that the...
That's fine. People don't usually use that phrase. They either say buongiorno or buonasera. They don't often say the middle one.
Kind of the same in English.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we don't either.
So you don't hear it very often.
You know, there's a lot of similarities. There's so many similarities in Italian and English that I didn't realize until I took a class at the University of Washington on Italian, and the teacher said, in Italian we have this exclamation, good night, buonanotte, kind of like almost like a curse a little bit, you know, like good night. And she said, we don't have that in English. And I said, yes, we do. I hear people say that all the time. When I was a kid, people say, oh, good night, good grief, you know. And she said, oh, I didn't realize that. And then she said, and in Italian we have this very, very, very formal way of speaking, which is the third person, but we don't have that in English. And I said, yes, we do. Queen Victoria, we are not amused. She was like, oh, I guess we do. That's kind of
languages.
Funny. Lots of similarities.
We could talk about them for ages because there's just so many quirks and interest and find out so much about the nation by its language. That's something that I've learned a lot.
Oh, that can be the podcast for our next live.
Yeah, exactly. We've got enough going on with this one at the moment to not include that one, I think, really. So, talking about things going on, I can hear an Italian lady whose name is actually Sophia shouting outside my back door. So I'm just going to shut it gently because she's shouting to someone across another balcony.
It's not bothering me.
Anyway, so yes, thank you. I want to start by saying thank you to our patrons, as always. And I saw that, Andrea, you put up the wonderful video call that we did with Chef Aaron Goldstein, where he showed us how to cook injeeras. I mean, literally how to cook them, and his technique of putting the batter in the pan in a kind of concentric circle all the time just floored me. And that was interesting. It's a wonderful video, and I know that some of the patrons already listened to it and watched it. So thank you very much for ordering that and putting it up for us. And if anyone's interested in supporting us in what we're doing, and also getting some goodies back, the things that we're super excited about, like watching Aaron make injeera, then head to our Patreon feed. You'll find a link for it in the show notes, and you can see how that rolls. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a great video. So we recorded it audio and video, so you can either go into your private podcast feed for the patrons and listen to it, or you can, if you look in the show notes for that, there's the link to the video and the password, so you can actually watch him cook it too. So it's very interesting, and injeera's an amazing, it's just naturally gluten-free and fermented pancake.
Talking of pancakes, have you had breakfast?
No.
Oh, not anything. Oh dear. Do you have plans for something special?
Didn't quite make it there. We'll probably have our usual eggs. Well, this is a good usual right now. Eggs and the fermented pancakes. The pancakes got really foamy, by the way. The batter. It's been puffing up quite a lot in the fridge, so I know it's fermenting on its own.
You know, I often have a kind of an endless pancake batter in the fridge. And sometimes I kind of forget about it for 5 or 6 days, and I get it out and it's like, ooh, that's very fermented. Wow. And then when I put it in the pan, all these massive holes appear, and it's really beautiful.
I like them better when they're fermented like that. The more fermented they are. I don't know if anybody else. What is crawling on my blinds? Maybe it's a giant ant carrying something, or it's a spider. I can't tell. Anyways, as long as it eats bugs, I don't care what it is. Anyways, lost my train of thought there. But I was noticing the other day when I made some pancakes and we ran out of batter, so I made another batch, on the spot, and then made some out of that. I feel like I get really bloated when I eat those pancakes, but when after they sit in the fridge for a day or two, they don't seem to give me
absolutely
problems.
completely.
So,
there's so many little things. I mean, fermenting's not a little thing, is it? But really, leaving it in the fridge for 3 days is not something that takes time. I also find the same with very cold food versus food that's been warmed up. I'll actually talk about the polenta bread because we had some for lunch. But when I make my polenta bread, I like to warm it up, even if it's just for a little while, because when I have it straight from the fridge, it just doesn't go down as well. So I think little things like that can really help your digestion.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to feed into our comfort food conversation today too.
You're just giving away what we're talking about
but
today.
On the... sorry. On our... on Aaron's injeera video... I actually kind of translated that into my morning pancakes. I'm not pouring them in concentric rings, no. But I did try it, and the batter was just like, we're not into this.
Who do you think you are, Chef Aaron?
Blobs. Yeah. What are you, anyways? But I've been trying. I've basically just kind of taken the way he was cooking it. I always used grease on the pan, and now I'm like, let me try less and less, and then I'm realizing they're actually coming off better. Like I only maybe grease it between every 4 pancakes.
Okay.
And then I actually went to the thrift store here and found a metal flipper like the one he was using. And I do not know how I got this far in my life without one. Like my life has changed. So
wow, that's kitchen tools.
So anyways, and it was like 50 cents, I think, at the store. So, it was a cheap little buy, and somebody else had used it. And then it looks pretty old, like it has probably from the 50s or something.
That's nice. I like that.
So it's coming back to life again. Yeah. But I do have something in front of me right now. I have some apricot tea. It's like apricot and black tea combined. So it has a little bit of caffeine with some raw milk and some raw honey. And that's just giving me some like carb and fat to
keep you going,
sail me through the next hour.
I have a ginger tea.
All right. Did you have lunch?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, you had lunch. I have a ginger tea in front of me.
Good.
Gabriel's been a bit under the weather, so I'm trying to boost my immune system, and I've learned recently that very, very, very strong ginger tea sipped throughout the day does wonders for your immune system. So I'm sipping that today.
That's good.
Yeah, we had lunch. We had quite an unusual lunch. We usually have sourdough bread for lunch, but we didn't today. We had the barley...
no, you usually have heart.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, no, we didn't have heart. Woohoo! We had barley polenta bread. So that's a barley polenta, which I don't know if you've seen the videos that I put out, I think last week, where I talk through sourdough porridge, sourdough polenta and sourdough polenta bread. But the barley polenta is made in the way that I make it in the video. There's the porridge one's on my homepage, ancestralkitchen.com, and then there's a link on there where you can get to the other 2 videos. And so I made the barley polenta bread a few days ago, sliced that up and fried it in some olive oil for lunch. And then we got some bok choy from the market last Thursday, looking really, really lovely. So I chopped that up small and cooked it in another frying pan with ginger and garlic. And then I scrambled some eggs for me and Rob. Gabriel had some fish. And then we had some chunks of fat on the side because Flavio, my farmer, I asked him if he could get me some back fat to make lard, but also give me a piece that I could use to make lardo. Do you know what lardo is?
I have actually heard the word before, but
okay, it's like it's a
I don't know if I've heard it used other than as like a pejorative.
Okay, no, it's not one of those. It's something really delicious. It's an Italian cured product, which is basically back fat of a pig that is covered in salt and various spices and left for a very long time, usually or traditionally under pressure in marble big vases pushed. but I don't have a marble vase, and you can make it quite well by just salting it and putting your spices on and leaving it in the dark somewhere in the fridge, which I'm going to do. But what you need for it is quite a thick piece of back fat, and one with the rind still on. So he managed to get me a piece with the rind still on, but it was too thin to do lardo. So he said, "Oh, I think it's too thin. You can just have this." So I thought, okay, well, it's too hard to cut it up to make lard in the slow cooker because it's got a rind on it. So we just I bought a load of vegetables and put them in a big roasting tin. Onions, sweet potato, leeks, mushrooms, things like that. And I just lay the back fat on the top and put it in the oven. And so all the fat went all through the veggies. And then at the end we had this big piece of kind of residual back fat, and I just put it in the fridge, and we've been chopping it up into little squares and putting some on the side of our plate. So we had that on the side as well, which, I mean, it's just eating lumps of back fat, but it was absolutely delicious. I remember when I went to Russia, like ages ago, long before I was cooking this way, and I was sitting at a rural family's house in Russia, and the tables there, they got the homemade vodka and the fish they got from the river and all these delicacies they'd made, and they had little pots with literally cubed bits of pork fat in, and you're supposed to have a bit of the pork fat and then down your vodka. And I was today at lunch, I was eating those bits of little back fat, thinking, oh, I remember this. There's no vodka at our table, but the fat was so good. So that was I think I mentioned all.
That sounds amazing. And we have a couple hog butcherings coming up, so it kind of makes me want to try and do some.
Oh, you should. Let me send you the recipe that I've got, because it takes a long time.
Yeah,
but lardo is so good. And then you just eat it uncooked. You just slice it really, really thinly. You can wrap it. You can wrap a date in it. You can put it onto a pizza.
It's like a fat sausage.
Yeah, it's basically fat sausage, fat bacon. Basically, you put juniper berries and lots of other things.
Well, it sounds
it's
amazing.
Lovely.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so this is kind of leading us into our topic today, which is comfort foods.
I know, we're just going there.
So yes. I'm really interested to talk to you about this, because I think we've got different things to bring to the table in the conversation, based on our kind of pasts, and it'll be interesting to explore it and kind of redefine comfort foods. I think that a lot of people think that if they choose to eat healthily, or in quotes, or they choose to eat ancestrally, that a lot of comfort foods have to go out the window. And I'm interested to dive into this with you and kind of roll it over, as it were. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. Oh wow, where to begin? Well, we're going to talk about comfort food. Let's define our terms. What is comfort food? What does that mean to you?
That's an interesting question. So I tried to make some notes earlier, thinking, what does this mean to me?
I know, me too.
And for me, the words I wrote down were luxury, and then moment, sensation, treat, soothing, trying to forget, senses so strong. And there's a mixture, I think, of those different kind of parts of my life in there. Because in the past, I used comfort food to forget what was going on in my life, because it would blot it out, because I've got the sensation of the comfort food in my mouth at that moment. Therefore, nothing matters.
Oh my gosh.
And, my relationship to food is completely different now to how it was when I was twice the weight I am now, age 20, eating white chocolate by the kilogram in my room. But it's and it's been interesting to see how my relationship with comfort food has developed and changed, and how I see it now. How about you? What do you define as comfort food?
Well, something you said right before we started recording just really struck me. And kind of what you just said, but the way you said it was just so raw. You said, my relationship with comfort food is complicated. It's changed a hell of a lot. And that just really struck me. And now when you said just now, like, trying to forget, I feel like I'm going to cry. Like, just thinking about that's what the word comfort food evokes in your mind. I mean, that's really hard to hear.
I don't think I'm the only one. I think that a lot of our population isn't. I mean, it's not just food, is it? You can in order to get to blot out the problems in your life and the things that make you feel uncomfortable, you can turn to food, you can turn to shopping, you can turn to sex, you can turn to TV, you can turn to cigarettes,
any
kind of numbing. But there's, for me, the kind of, because I don't have the same relationship with comfort food that I had as a kid and an adolescent and a young woman, everything's different, and my life's run differently now, but I still got that energy in my body. You know, I still can feel how I used to feel when I used comfort food like that. And so that's what I think I meant when I said it's complicated, because even though these things leave us and we move on, there's still kind of an energetic imprint of them in our lives, I think, no matter how much we move on, you know?
Well, it's kind of, when you compared comfort food to any other numbing mechanism, you know, gambling, drugs, whatever, it reminded me of a conversation we had before where we talked about somebody can have an addiction to something, and the way to kick that addiction is to quit it completely. You know, you don't have a sip now and then, you just stop drinking alcohol completely, if that's what the trigger and the problem is right there. But with a food addiction, it's confusing because you have to keep eating.
Yeah.
So you can't just not eat. You have to control what you eat. And so it's this bizarre sort of, it's like you have to learn how to manage and control the addiction rather than just walk away from it completely. And then pray to God that it changes, you know, and it doesn't have that kind of chokehold on you anymore. So then when you're saying that about comfort food, it's interesting because it's almost like, you know, you pinpointed the addiction wasn't, you know, just a sandwich. It was my comfort food that I used strategically for numbing. So I had to walk away from that completely. And then the caution you expressed when we talked about recreating comfort foods in a new way, and you were like, you know, kind of cautious about that, you know, and sugar and things like that you've talked about before. That's just interesting for me to hear you bring that up.
Yeah, this is such an interesting and deep topic. From where I am at the moment, which was way down in my list of notes that I made, I would say that really I don't have any comfort foods now because I don't need them. Ooh. Now, that doesn't mean that food isn't comforting to me, because food is pleasurable and it should be pleasurable in and of itself. I mean, it's beautiful. And, you know, the difference between using it to medicate and becoming addicted like I did, and then just being in a position where, you know, it didn't just happen overnight. It's been 20 years of me dealing with it every single day and changing my world and my diet every single day. But to the point now where food is pleasurable and I love food, and I still have some of those words, luxury, in my foods every meal. I have sensation in my foods every meal. I have moments in my foods every meal. And I enjoy those. I get such pleasure from them. But the difference is that I'm not addicted to them anymore, and I'm not using them to medicate because of the way that my physiology has changed, the way I've changed my food, the way I've changed how I cook and eat my food, but also the way I've changed my kind of psychological health and what I'm doing in my life. And so my foods are still comforting, but they're not, in quotes, comfort foods, I would say. You know, I don't feel like I have particularly any issues with being addicted to food at all. And I cannot tell you what it is like to sit here and say that, knowing how I was as a child who just overate on that kind of thing all the time. It's amazing. You know, sometimes I sit back and go, wow, you know, that happened. But obviously it was 20 years of little tiny happenings to get there all the way. But yeah, that's why I said it's kind of complicated, because food is comforting and should be comforting and should be really pleasurable. But with the way that food is made these days, normal food is made in order to make us addicted a lot of the time. And therefore it is easy for for anyone who's eating that kind of food, and anyone also who has perhaps nutritional deficiencies from the way that they're eating or not eating, to fall into the trap of using food as comfort. And, you know, our world supports that. It wants us to be distracted, so we don't actually think about why we're here and stand up for that, I think.
No, it's interesting that you say that you don't have any comfort foods, because I'm looking at my list, the notes that I made. I thought, comfort food, what do I think of? And tea was one of the first things that went on there. Like, to me, that's a comfort food. I don't know. I thought like tea, soup, stew, like hot bowls of things. It just like comforts me. I went out to the freezer last night and I took out a turkey, and I put the turkey like in a basket to bring inside with some other things. And I thought, turkey, that's a comfort food for me. And turkey is just like to me, having a whole bird to, having a whole bird to work with is like soothing, because it's like, oh, look, there's so much meat, there's so much bones, like I can make soup, I can make broth, I can make, you know, shredded meat, and I just feel like this wave of just
pleasure,
just like comfort come over
because
me.
you're in your element there in the kitchen, doing all that stuff and knowing what it see, that's true. That is comfort, isn't it? And it's from what I'm hearing, it's coming from the lips of someone who hasn't been addicted to food in the same way that I have been.
No, I think, and I think you're right, because I'm just thinking about it as we're saying this, because when we say define terms, and we're both walking in a different dictionary, and I was thinking, okay, it's not that I haven't had issues with food, or I'm sure I still have plenty of issues with food, but it never quite ran me the same way that you've experienced. Can you put the link to that blog post? You remember that blog post you sent me a long time ago that you made? Like, I just cried when I read it, because I couldn't believe that you had actually gone through all of that, and the pictures were just like, I didn't know who I was looking at. Like, it was just mind-blowing, and that might be really encouraging for somebody who's kind of walking through it, to see, because I never in a million years would have looked at you and thought that was your past. Like, never ever would have thought that.
It's easy to look at people from the outside and think that they've always been like that, and right. You know, think that we should be like them, and all of that rubbish. That it is complete rubbish. Yeah, I can link that. That's actually on my art website, that post. But yeah, it's got some pictures in it, which is easy to see.
Yeah, it wasn't on your ancestral one; it was on the art one. But when I think of comfort food, I just thought, like, let me like freestyle a list. I called Lexi too. I sent like a voice memo, and I was like, comfort foods, you know. And so she was saying things that she thought, and she said, I don't think summer foods can be a comfort food, can they? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not really thinking of like cucumber salad as a comfort food.
Warmth is definitely part of it. When I got down to the bottom of my notes, I was kind of saying, well, what's my food that I associate with comfort now? And I've got a tea on there as well. But warmth is, I think, a very, very important one. The idea that you can see it physically, that you could sit there with your hands around something and it's warming up your hands.
Exactly. Oh my God.
That's so comforting when it's cold.
Yeah. Totally. I think it's those, like, if we really, really, because I tried to boil it down in my head. I was like, okay, why is it comforting? What means it's comforting? Like, wherefore shalt it be comforting? And I thought, it's just these primal needs of warmth and like carbohydrate satisfaction for your brain. A lot of times, like, I put honey in here. Honey's, you know, that just hits, like, there's like a sweet spot that it itches, right? And then the fat that you need, like that lardo you're describing, I was thinking, as my mouth was watering, like, that's a comfort food right there, because you eat it and you just like close your eyes and like wash away, you know, like, oh my gosh, like, unreal, you know, salt on there. I don't know why I was like, protein, it doesn't come to my mind as a comfort food, even though I just said that turkey is a comfort food for me. But like, I don't think of like a steak as like, you know, cuddle up with a steak, you know, but cuddling up with like a bowl of broth, which I guess is protein. Like,
it's the warmth though, isn't it? Like, so let's go back to the definition, because those foods that you give us examples of there, are you, when you have those, are you using them to improve your mood, or are they improving your mood just tangentially? I'm interested in that.
Okay, that's an interesting question because I don't. I'm going to say this and I'm going to caveat it. I don't know that I eat to improve my mood necessarily, but if I don't eat, everything tanks.
Yeah,
so like
okay.
if I'm hungry, like just pure hungry, of course you're like, I'm hungry. Like I need some food, I can't think. Like, of course that happens, but I mean, you're talking about like if I'm sad or upset and like, I don't know. I guess I didn't really think about it. I don't know. Like if I'm feeling down and like make like a batch of cookies or a cup of tea. I don't know if it's really the like making bread is very calming. I don't know if it's the actually end product of eating the bread that calms me so much as the process. Sometimes just preparing food, like working with that turkey, just feels very comforting to me. Just like maybe it's because of this again primal fear of starvation or something, and it's like, well, I've got this whole turkey. I got this whole turkey in front of me. Like I've got food. Like we're good. I don't have to worry. I don't know. That's interesting. An interesting question. I'm really going to be watching myself now if I'm using the food for like modulating my own mood.
I don't think.
How
I think to
about
some
you?
extent what you're describing is healthy because, if I'm feeling particularly agitated, I know that if I make bread calmly, that it is going to calm me down.
Okay, you saw my theory on Instagram. I think I commented on one of your posts. Like, I'm like, is the yeast talking to us? Like, is that why it's so calming to just like sink your arms into? I know you said that bakers have
probiotic fingers,
yeast on their hands, and I remember a friend telling me a long time ago who was a chef, and he said, whenever you make dough, no matter what, even if you use a stand mixer, because he owns a couple of restaurants, and he said you still have to put your like hands in it, and get like that yeast from your hands into the dough. And I always thought that was so interesting. Of course our modern world would reject that because that's unsterile, but I don't know, I wonder if the yeast in the bread talks back to us, and that's why it's so calming just to like just gush yourself into that, like I need my arms into this.
I think there's also a stepping into a kind of a being of the person who makes bread, because that is a primal thing that would have been done in order to feed yourself and your family. And our ancestors would have done that a lot more than we do now, along with other things like, going looking for tubers and hunting. And there's some instinctive, I don't know what it is, cells, DNA, whatever inside us, that when we do that, as opposed to engaging with all of the technology that man has built, then we somehow fall into an older part of our nature, which feels right. Yeah. And I know that sensation drives both of us in what we do every day,
Totally. I really feel like I wrote in my notes peasant food, because anything that evokes that for me feels like a comfort food. Oh, I am not saying that I don't love cinnamon rolls and cookies and I love that kind of stuff. I'm just saying also, like, if you have like a torn hunk of bread or a like rustic, like broken wedge of cheese, and it's, sitting next to this, good looking maybe pottery bowl of soup, it's just like, oh my gosh, that is like the perfect comfort food. And layer that with coming in with like your cheeks are red and your fingers are cold and, really and your stomach is growling and your like legs hurt from stacking wood, and you're just like, this is what life is all about right here. Like, so sit me down.
That's completely different to the situation we have in our modern world with, like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, cookie dough that someone would have after coming back from the office and coming in and going, oh, I hate my job, sitting down and eating ice cream. And it's
okay. Do you think it's the same? Do you think it's the same thing? It's just being hot wired in a way.
What do you mean?
Like by sugar, maybe, but like you're stressed by, you know, the emotional tangles of your job versus the like physical exhaustion of your, you know, stacking
I see
wood
what
or
you
whatever.
mean.
And then you're seeking nourishment. Like your brain needs to get the satiety centers like tapped out, right? But you're going in, maybe we're just like going in the wrong
direction for it. Well,
corner for satisfaction.
I would expand that to say, well, you know, if your job's doing that to you, like more than a couple of times a week, then that's a call for you to go and find another way of living your life, or try to find another way of living your life, or change the situation. That's very different, I think, from having been physically working all day and being hungry and then coming back and being cold and putting your hand around a bowl of soup and eating and drinking simply. You know, we were talking just before we started recording about this book, Citopia, that I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's written by an Englishwoman called Caroline Steele, and it is fabulous. Anyway, I know she's very well read and educated, and she was talking about Epicurus and how that philosopher has now been kind of associated with eating too much, you know, being a gourmand and eating very, very, very well. But actually, when you go back to the roots of him, he was basically exhorting doing what you've just said. You know, the deepest pleasure in food is to be hungry and to eat and drink simply and have that first kind of moment of hunger or moment of thirst quenched, because that's where real comfort, just, you know what it's like, everyone knows, they've been out all day and been on a walk and it's cold, and you come back in and there's a cup of tea and a biscuit, or there's some soup, and you sit down. Oh, it's a pleasure to sit down because your legs are exhausted, and then you've got this beautiful food, and doesn't it taste like the best food you've ever eaten?
Well, we have this whole saying, hunger is the best sauce. Like, you know, everybody who's traveled has this story about, you know, we're in this village and we hadn't eaten since 6 a.m. and they like, all they did was they put this thing on the coals and then we ate it and it's the best thing I've ever had, you know. And then, they go to restaurants and they go here and there and they're like trying to, these people make that same dish and like, it's just not the same. And it's like, nothing's the same without the environment and even everything that led up to your meal feeds into, no pun intended, that experience of the food.
I agree. And I also think there's something which has happened more recently, which is the more prevalence to have snacks. And if we're snacking all day, we don't get that same hunger signals. You know what it's like? You've been a day without food. You get that immense pleasure from that moment, that sensation, that comfort. But if you've been snacking on things all day, you never get that satisfaction. And maybe that satisfaction is something that's, kind of part of us, and we need that in order to feel normal in life. And if we're snacking all the time and we don't get that, well, then maybe we're going to go looking for it somewhere else. Perhaps. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. And maybe, Alison, what's happening is you need that satisfaction. Like your body, like innately craves for it. And maybe you just, you know how like, the drug, you're always looking for the never bigger high, or you have to do higher and higher stakes when you're gambling because the risk, like you just get a little more numb to the feeling, right? So you need like a more and more intense risk or whatever. Maybe that's what we're doing with the food. Like this comfort food thing gets so out of whack because you really need that hunger and then that sated feeling, and so you keep trying to get it, but you're not actually getting it. So you keep trying again. Oh, and snacking is a new thing. Yeah. It's really interesting when, I can't remember if we talked about, I'm sorry to the listener if I repeat myself, because I can't remember what Alison and I talk about in real life.
Real life. The podcast isn't real life.
Oh yeah, you know what I mean. Offline. Well, it's still online, so I don't even know how to say it. I don't know what we talked about, not on air. But in that book, Why We Get Fat by Gary Tobes, which is a great book to read if you want to hear a little bit about that marketing history, talked about it, was how he said, the snack industry was starting to reach a dead end because everybody who was going to buy snacks was buying snacks. And so they're like, how do we get you to buy more snacks? And they have their demographics figured out. And they knew, people over a certain age, I'll say like, I don't know, 50. People over 50 didn't eat snacks, right? So they knew, it's only young people who eat snacks or whatever. And then when they started reading their demographics, they found, wait a minute, that data from 10 years ago said people over 50 don't eat snacks, but now they do. And what they found was not that people of a certain age just don't want snacks. It was that the people who hadn't grown up with snacks weren't buying snacks. They didn't have a paradigm for it. Their mother told them, don't eat that, you'll spoil your supper. That famous kind of mom phrase. And now there's we have snacks in the car. We have snacks at, get-togethers. You guys instituted tea, afternoon tea. But that's no, I'm not saying this, but I'm saying it's like that one break because, in your, that British kind of culture, this is everything I know about you I learned from books, so sorry if it's wrong, but your dinner was a little bit later in the day, so that was like you're in between, but it was because you're not snacking that your blood sugar would be dropping, you would need a little bit of something. It wasn't like this, there's these fancy teas I've seen people do, but this wasn't always, from what I've read about your people, this wasn't always like this huge full-blown gigantic meal. It was just like a little bit to keep you going until your protein hit of the night.
I wish I knew the history of afternoon tea, because it seems to be a very elitist thing to do in England. That you can go to the Ritz and you can go to the posh hotels and have them.
I read about the other day that. Well, I read that Queen Victoria was the one who instituted it, but I was like, wait, that seems fairly recent. I thought it was older than that. But then it is a very elite thing because you're eating later at night. This is, again, everything I learned about your folk, I learned from books. But because you're eating later at night because you are upper class. Yeah. And that's, people are getting together and
you can have electric lights, or you can afford lights in the evening, whereas the other people have to go to bed when it's dark.
After they wash your dishes, right? So, but and then I guess we can blame Tolkien for all the snacks because he came around with 11s and second breakfast and all this stuff.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to look at other cultures and see how the snack thing works with them, because I think really. With Gabriel, it's been really interesting to see how we have wanted him to eat pattern-wise during the day and how other parents have wanted their kids to eat or have had their kids eat. Because, I would say, out of all of the families we've known in various different countries, ever since Gabriel was a kid, we are probably one of the only ones who do not give their kids snacks. And, we would, from the point where the kids are in the buggy, the mum's going out with a bag with little bits of rice cakes and nuts and this and that and the other. And then, when there was an opportunity to go to houses or go to a preschool, there's always a snack. And when we would say to people, we don't snack, we'd be like, what? But your kid needs, they're going to have a meltdown if they don't snack. They're not going to have enough. Well,
no. Of course you're going to have a meltdown if the food you had was nutrient devoid.
If you didn't have enough saturated fat to satiate you, if you haven't had enough fat to satiate you through the morning, then
animal fat? What?
And I think it's a big thing that makes sense. People, certainly in Europe, the people that I've met, think that kids need to snack, otherwise they're going to implode. And I suppose it's, as the parents do, if the parents snack, well then the kid's going to learn to snack, just like if the parents eat liver, the kid's going to eat liver probably. But
But why did the parents learn how to snack?
Well, yeah.
Because that's what we have to hunt down. Why did the parents learn how to snack? Because if you keep counting back far enough, their parents didn't snack. So where did it start? And it was all marketing by marketers trying to sell more food, because they're selling you. I mean, this can all be traced historically. You can go, I'm not just making this up. You can go back and read about this in these books. But these, you can only sell so much yogurt for breakfast, okay? After you eat breakfast, after you eat lunch, after you eat dinner, then what? So we have to invent more things for you to buy in between. So then in come the snacks. And then nobody wants to buy them because they're like, but I already had breakfast. I'm waiting until lunch, right? I don't want to spoil my lunch. Well, then we have these terms invented. Snack attack. Snack attack is a marketing term invented by a chip company. It's not just something that people are like, oh, snack attack. This is a term that was invented. All these slogans that people think is just cultural, they're marketing slogans.
But it's mainstream now. It's mainstream, and doctors will tell you to. I remember when I was first diagnosed with polycystic ovaries, and I read a book that was about healing your polycystic ovaries, and there was a large section in it about diet. And it talked about maintaining blood sugar levels throughout the day. And it said for people with polycystic ovaries, it's better to eat 5 or 6 smaller meals a day rather than 3 bigger ones. And so therefore I used to snack, healthily, in quotes, for what I knew at the time, because it was 20 years ago. Okay. But I used to snack in order to, in quotes, keep my blood sugar up. So I wouldn't have problems with blood sugar spikes, which feed into polycystic ovaries and mean that your body is producing too much insulin. But it's interesting that really since I'm trying to think when I stopped snacking, and I can't remember if I used to snack when I was vegan and raw vegan, or whether the snacking
just made me think of this,
stopped when I started eating saturated fat. But I think...
Well, why is your blood sugar spiking?
Well, yeah, exactly, because you haven't got the right nutrient balance in what you're eating in the 3 meals a day.
Exactly.
And also because you've taught your body to do it. Like I believe...
If you're eating
go on.
almonds and raisins for a snack, of course your blood sugar is going to spike. Okay. This is so interesting. I did not...
This is not in my notes. I wasn't expecting us to start talking about this.
Not in mine either.
Uh-oh.
It's the best, though.
But
we're off trail now.
What was I going to say? Because you said something earlier on about snacking.
Okay, you said that you don't know when you stopped snacking. Yeah, I don't know when
I stopped snacking.
You couldn't trace when it was.
I know that I don't snack now at all, and I don't feel a need to snack at all. And I know that a lot of my health issues were resolved through eating more saturated fat. And it's interesting that these addictions that I had as a child to comfort food. So when I was a kid and I was overweight and a teenager, I used to eat, it was really things that were sweet and that were creamy, that gave me that sensation that would knock out the other things. So I used to, when I found condensed milk.
Because you're probably craving saturated fat. You're probably craving
and also,
really bad.
White sugar is just ridiculously addictive. So I used to find creamy things and make sure I had sugar in. So that's why I like white chocolate. That's why I used to get extra thick yogurt and I used to put sugar in it and stir it around and eat it. And then when I moved to wanting, and that's how I did. Literally,
heard of that.
I used to
you never
put
told me that
spoons
before.
of sugar in yogurt and stir it around and eat it.
That sounds disgusting.
When no one was looking.
I mean, you can say comfort foods that people are addicted to, and I'm like, oh yeah, cinnamon rolls. That sounds pretty good. But I don't know, just putting straight sugar in yogurt actually.
Sugar is has been my nemesis.
Honey and yogurt.
That's nice.
Honey and yogurt. I do like. Honey
but I think when I lost the weight originally, when I was between 20 and 21, I continued snacking because I cut fat out of my diet back then, which I would never do now if I went back then. But then I continued with sugar. So I was continuing to kind of need to have snacks because I was using sugar as my main kind of source of energy and not having that stability that protein and fat helps. And I remember eating when we were vegan and we were in Italy and we were raw vegan, I do remember I still had problems with foods because I used to make these chocolate bars out of dehydrated buckwheat, which I'd sprouted, and I used to mix it up with kind of raw cacao and some other kind of raw sugary sweet things. And I was completely addicted to them. I mean, literally, I remember making about 40 of them and saying to Rob, you have to hide this Tupperware from me because I cannot not eat them. And he had to take the Tupperware and hide it somewhere in our flat so I didn't know where it was. And I just don't have any of that again since then. You know, I went to ancestral foods initially because of fertility, but since looking at those foods in the face that I was terrified of, like cheese, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fat, you know, fatty meats, and incorporating those back in my diet, all that stuff with the food that I couldn't stop eating has just kind of disappeared. I don't know where it went. You know, it's fascinating to try and unravel how much of it is psychological, how much of it is nutrition deficiencies, how much of it comes from the media, how much of it is from our families, how much of it is not trusting ourselves. It's a tangle that you're so individual for each person who's listening, and also is impossible to kind of thread back, you know. But it's fascinating still.
Do you feel like if somebody gave you a piece of that chocolate thing today, it would be a problem, or you'd be like, you know, like if you actually ate it, you know, would you be like, I need more of them, or do you feel like you'd just be like,
no, absolutely not. I probably wouldn't want to eat it.
Oh, wow. No, it sounds gross.
But it wouldn't be a problem.
Huh.
But it's difficult for me to kind of extrapolate this onto anyone else because I mean I don't eat any sugar.
Right.
And I don't do that because I don't do that because I was addicted to sugar and I can't handle sugar. I do that because I know what sugar does to my body and to my cycle and to my body just can't handle sugar. It can't at all. So I don't eat any sugar. I don't have the problem with having a bit of sugar and then wanting more because I don't eat sugar and I've got used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mean refined sugar, or do you, like you said something the other day, you baked something but you put molasses in it, or no, the root beer, I think. So the root, so sugars still show up sometimes. So the
root beer
how does that work?
I didn't have much of it, but I figure that most of we leave it to ferment until it's not sweet anymore to start with. So I figure that most of the sugar's gone, and I really don't eat or drink things like that in quantity at all. I don't have fruit either. No. So I literally have, the only sugar I have has been turned into something else in water kefir or something like a root beer or a beer. I don't have any straight foods that are simple sugars.
Yeah. And does Gabriel ever have anything?
Yeah, he does.
You posted something the other day he had that was like a little sweet treat.
Yeah, he does. So Rob and Gabriel eat things with sugar in. Generally, they eat fruit, every day. So Rob has like 3 or 4 pieces of fruit a day. Gabriel has like a piece and a half of fruit every day.
But it doesn't give them the same vertigo?
No, because they don't have my history of overdosing on sugar for 15 years and it being the reason why they were obese. So they don't have the same gut biome, even though Gabriel obviously got my gut biome because he was a natural birth. And so I've been very, like, as a mother, very kind of tentative and a bit wary about it. But we don't use sugar that much. Generally we have sugar in the house because we use it for water kefir and we use it for bread kvass. Very occasionally I will make kind of a muffin treat, but mostly I will put honey in it. Sometimes maybe once a month Gabriel will have honey on his bread. Sometimes he makes little jams out of fruits that he just warms up, but he doesn't put any sugar in it. And then I think the last time he ate proper sugar was his birthday last year when he wanted an apple crumble. So I made a small tiny apple crumble for him, which had some unrefined brown sugar in the crumble on the top. So that was April.
So isn't it interesting talking about this, because it's fascinating, you know, when we pick a topic and it branches out into so many different directions. You know, it's like the spokes on a wheel. There's not really one thing that's not connected, and then it starts spinning so fast and you can't, it all becomes a blur and you can't see between the two. But I was thinking while you were talking about snacking, and I was trying to think about what do we do for snacks? And I don't know. A snack just seems like so much work to me, because it's like you have to prepare a whole nother thing. I just don't. I don't know. If the kids are like, I'm really hungry, and I usually say something. Well, I want you to eat your dinner, so I'm not giving you whatever. But like, I need something right now. Then it's like, okay, well, you can have a slice of cheese.
Okay.
So there's. And it's not like I would make my kids stand there like crying, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Nobody, call the police on me or something. But, it's like, I'm almost done making dinner. You can wait. It's okay to be hungry
That's
sometimes.
a really important thing
Maybe
to say. It's okay to be
hunger.
hungry.
Yeah. I'm not making them like starve until they pass out or something. It's just a normal waiting. Oh, that's interesting now that even me saying that, thinking that somebody's going to think I'm abusing my child by making them wait for dinner. Like what a culture to live in. And I wonder if, I was just thinking about this while you were talking about, your meals and snacks. And I'm thinking about what happens on the days when we turn to snacks. And I'm thinking it's like, the days when just something frenetic, like frantic, time-based, crazy stuff is happening. And I was thinking the rise of snacks and the decline of like the family meal seemed to happen at the same time. And I wonder if it's because, in a way, when a mealtime is coming, it's okay to be hungry. And I was thinking, with Young Living has sent me on some of their like retreats. And when you go on a retreat, with Young Living, you just go to farms. And so they take us out to their farm and, they feed you breakfast in the morning and then they have lunch at a certain time and then you go back and you have dinner, right? And you get so hungry in between and you're just like walking around in fields and doing whatever kind of activities they have for you. But you're like, oh, I just can't wait. Like you're just looking forward to that lunch. It's like, oh, it's going to be so good, and they always serve kind of like these, ancestrally sort of meals, like meat and sourdough bread and stuff like that. So like, oh, I just can't wait to eat it, and it's hot and you're just going to be so satisfied, and I remember thinking when I was out there at the first one, because I came, it was just me and whoever, I think Camille was the baby at the time when I went to the first one, and I didn't bring anything with me. Like I had no snacks, no little nothing. And so I thought, oh, this is interesting. Like I'm going to be so hungry. And I almost thought like, oh no, like I didn't bring anything to eat, and then I was like, well, they're going to give you a meal. You're not going to die. I was breastfeeding. So of course you're like always hungry, but, but it was just an interesting moment because my food's never really been in somebody else's control. Yeah. It's always me that determines when the meals are. And so that was, it made me think for a minute, like when Gary comes in and he says, when is dinner, and I'm like, well, it'll be, dinner is, like, I mean, obviously, and he was like, yes, but when? And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of like he's not determining when the meals are. So he wants to know when they are. And then it's making me think, okay, is this a part of like a food insecurity issue if I have to have snacks with me all the time because I don't have a predictive, I don't know. I don't know if I can unravel this completely right now, but it's just like feeling, where does that meal time, sitting down, coming in hungry and knowing the food will be there, play into the snacking? And then I don't know if this is the same for you, but I also, when I really started observing my tendencies, like if you want something, like if you're craving something, look at why. I'm not saying like don't go satisfy it. I'm just saying look at why. And I have observed, I don't know if this is the same for any other women, but when I'm on my period, I tend to want to like snack on things. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why that is. I'm like, I just want to like bite a piece of cheese, or especially look for sweet things. Like, I want something sweet right now. I don't know why. I don't know if it's that weird for anybody else.
Interesting. There's so many things in what you just said. And there's one thing that that I do want to say about that kind of observing thing, because I think there's a well, maybe it's just because I'm so kind of willing to look at myself, and perhaps sometimes a bit too much, and blame myself for my habits. But I think there's also a case for trusting what your own body is telling you and trusting your senses, because until you do that, you won't be able to trust your senses. You know, if you always say, well, I want this sweet thing, and obviously that's wrong because I'm and you don't have it, then you're never giving yourself the opportunity to put yourself in that situation and know that you can trust yourself. And
that's good.
I also
Alison.
think that there's something which is, for me, was very hard, but something that Rob tried to teach me, which was, you know, sometimes have that thing, but have it without the sense of panic and shame and all the other stuff that is kind of around you deciding to have it. Have it and really, really, really enjoy it. Feel every sensation, every taste, every texture, you know, every single moment of it. Because then you will actually get the satisfaction from it. I think very often we crave these things, or I did in the past, and we like, right, I've got to have it. And then it's a panic, you know, I don't want to see, or I don't want this, and I shouldn't be doing this. And then we wolf it down, and then it didn't give us any satisfaction anyway. And we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to trust that we can stop to actually experience that thing. And so, you know, sometimes it's right to question why you're doing it, but sometimes it's also right to just do it, but maybe do it without try to consciously overpower the potential shame and panic, and go, yeah, I'm just going to enjoy this. And what I found through doing that was that I could be trusted. But it took a damn long time, you know. It took a damn long time for me to go, look, you can eat this cheese, Alison, and you're not going to eat all of it. You can eat this thing here, this bread. And when I first started eating bread again after not eating bread for ages, it was a bit of a mess. I was just like, oh, bread, bread. I remember. But through consciously engaging with that food stuff, slowly trusting that I could have a loaf of bread in front of me and only eat what was right for me. And that's taken like literally 20 years for me to be able to look at foods that I like and say, actually, look, I've put too much on my plate there. I don't think I'm going to be able to eat all that, and put a bit less or leave some. And I know we're probably getting more into the realms of kind of weight loss and addiction than comfort foods a bit, but still I think that
it's all related. It's all related.
It's important to trust yourself and give yourself the space to make mistakes and learn that you can trust yourself. Otherwise you'll never be able to trust yourself.
Yes. And I know we hear people say, and I want to be very careful when I say this, but I know we hear people say, like, you know, oh, you know, keep a food diary if you know, if you're like self-soothing with food, or like don't eat food to comfort yourself. I'm going to go ahead and say, like, if you're going through trauma and you want a brownie, eat a brownie. But also, if your life is one perpetual string of trauma after another, the food may be soothing you, but we now have a larger problem to deal with, which is we need to figure out how you can live a life that is not one perpetual string of trauma after another that needs to be numbed out.
And I think that's a life's work. It has been for me, you know. It's been a 180 from how I lived my life 20 years ago to now. And it's blooming difficult to go against the grain of society and make different decisions. But you're so right that though that's a vital thing, if that stress is chronic because of the life situation, then you can't necessarily change it overnight. But slowly you can. and that will affect the food.
I just want to emphasize the fact that food can be calming, to my mind, exists for a reason. Like, when you're sick, you want someone to bring you that broth. Like, you want to be soothed. You want to be calmed. When an infant cries, the mother puts the infant to her breast. You know, we want to be soothed, and that I think is fairly normal. I think. But again, if you're just in a constant, perpetual state of, like, you know, something traumatic is happening all the time, there's, you know, whatever you're using to deal with the trauma is going to become a problem at some point, because it will just become too much. You know, it's not a chronic fixer. It's like an acute fixer, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of explaining it. Tell me what your foods like that. And I want to know what it is that you were talking about earlier. You were mentioning soups and that kind of thing. Tell me what your foods are. Oh, yeah. That you would use like that.
Yeah, in my mind, I envisioned that most of this podcast would be talking about the food, but I'm realizing now that that's not even, like, the philosophy or the ideas behind it, the psychology of the comfort food is so much more interesting. I guess I did write some things down. I made a batch of cookies yesterday, and I thought to myself, oh, this feels like a comfort food to me. I think you alluded to, you know, when we talked about doing this podcast, we were talking about that we have the opportunity as parents to help shape what our children will see as comfort foods. And I feel like that's really important, because a lot of the things that I think of as comfort foods is because I remember making them with my mom when I was a kid. And that's why it's comforting. But then I'm also having to figure out how to hack my own desire for comfort foods. And one of those things is, so I'm going to use the cookies as a specific example. So I'm the second oldest of 8. Any other big families out there, shout out, you know. And when there's a lot of kids in the family, and I don't know if this is specific to me or if this is just, I've talked to other kids from big families, and they're like, oh yeah, that's totally how it is. Like, when there's cookies, you eat as many as you can, as fast as you can, because there'll be none when you come back. And I feel like that, not in everybody, but sometimes in some of us, that can set off, like, I don't know if it's like a poverty mindset, some kind of a trigger around food, where I think, like you said, you look at your plate and you think, oh, I took too much bread. Or you said, I went bread, because I hadn't had it or whatever. And you went a little bit crazy on it. That's how it can feel, because I think, well, you know, cookies are a huge production to make. They're not really, but, you know, cookies are a production to make. This is an ordeal. We don't do this all the time. They're just such a special thing. So I better just eat as many as I can right now, because they'll be gone. And there's not this concept of I'll just eat one. So what I have to do for myself is make the batch of dough, divide the dough, freeze some of the dough, because for whatever reason, then psychologically, when I eat a cookie, I'm like, well, I really don't need to eat. I really don't need to eat that many. I can eat one, because I know if I really, really want another one, I can go get the dough out and make it. And the odds of me wanting to go get the dough out and make it right away are, like, very low, because it's just a mental thing. It's not an actual physical need. It's just this mental idea of, well, it's going to be gone. And there's this phrase that we use. I've heard other kids from big families use it, like good food, right? So we're so used to having, you know, the soups and the stews and the comforting things that you can make for 12 people easily as a mom, right? And any sort of, like, individually prepared dish is like good food, you know?
Okay.
So when we see those things, like at parties, or, you think, oh, well, I should eat a lot of this because this will be gone. I won't have another chance. I don't really totally know how to explain it, but maybe somebody else, either half the audience is thinking, this lady has lost it, or the other half is thinking, I know.
No, I can get that. Even though I don't come from a big family, I can get that. You know, that if there was, like, 7 siblings around me, that I would come back and I want another cookie. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, they're gone.
And never, I should emphasize, never were we hungry. We never, my mom made, 3 meals a day. We sat down at the table and eat. Never did we not have, there was never like a food shortage ever in my life that I can ever remember. So I should emphasize that. So I don't, again, it's not an actual
real
like,
thing.
I grew up hungry and
I think it's important what you say
It's like
about
you didn't even have to
making
get that
them,
far.
because I think with engaging Gabriel in the food making as part of the kitchen and through making 3 meals a day, everything here, he is seeing how much effort goes into making good, real, nourishing food. And therefore, hopefully, it's a different, it's a completely different kettle of fish to how it was when I woke up, when I grew up, that, things came from the store and you could just go out and buy them. And we kind of don't do that. And so he's learning a different value to food than the value I put on food. And I think it's quite important what you're saying, that if you put the rest of the dough in the freezer, you understand, well, I've got to make all of this in order to have more. That's a really good point.
And I heard somebody say the saying once, like, oh, it's not junk food if it's made at home or something like that. And that it can be. But what I kind of take that idea to mean is, and I've thought this before, and we don't totally abide by this, but just the concept is in my mind. Like, if you are making everything, it really slows down the rate at of what you can consume of like a processed kind of product. So you're making your own cookies, you're making your own bagels, you're making your own, you will not eat as much of them because it is a lot of work. And yes, you can do things like I did with the dough, like you can make and freeze it, just probably there will come a time when I won't have to do that because it will be, mentally I won't need that like crutch, right? But you can still, you can overeat junk food that you make at home, but when you make all your food at home, I think it naturally modulates how much you're going to eat. And the other thing that we run into around like holidays is like we get the kids candies for holidays, and we get all organic, real sugar, no dyes, and or just to make things at home, one or the other. And people say to me, well, that is too expensive. We can't get that. We couldn't get enough. To which I say, that's the whole point. It naturally controls how much of the sweets you bring into your home, because you're like, that candy cane was $5. You are each getting one and it's gonna last you all December. Like you better enjoy this candy cane, right? But if you can buy packs and packs and packs of them for 99 cents, buy one, get one free, those BOGOs that you talked about, you can just eat them until you're like, you blow your brains out with them, because there's no limit to how much you can, I don't know. So natural
I think we need a podcast of 4 hours to stop talking about this. So you had cookies.
Alison, do we have some feelings to unpack on this?
You had cookies there. What else did you have on your list?
Yeah. Oh, geez, I forgot. I was reading my list, wasn't I? Okay, where did that go? Okay, cookies, bread, soup, stew, tea, / any hot beverage. So it's funny that you said hot. Cooking with large chunks of meat / bones. I don't know. I find that very, very satisfying. And just baking, like the actual activity of baking.
I find bread. That was one of my, what I would define as my comfort food now. Not that I really enjoy it when I eat it, and it feels so satisfying to me. And I think it comes from knowing that I made it, or Gabriel helped make it, and it's from our starter. It's the thing that we do. It feels so wonderful.
Yeah.
And porridge is the same or similar for me, but I do like it warm. I don't like I make a lot,
Yeah,
but I
me
heat it
too.
up if I leave it in the fridge. And it just feels warm and thick and unctuous and lovely. So I think
warm and thick, unctuous. Yeah, I put hot, warm, digestible, healing.
Yeah.
Those were the words that came to mind when I thought of comfort foods. Which is not to say that like a cookie is not. It's not really digestible.
You can make it more digestible,
but it's not really. Yeah, I mean it soaks overnight, so I guess it's kind of digestible. But it's not as digestible as like 3-day sourdough bread.
I have tea on my list too, because my favourite tea is cacao husk tea, and it has such a chocolatey flavour, and yet it's just a drink. And the reason I kind of think of it as a comfort food is because I generally stop when I have it. So I will make it, and I will make a point of sitting down and doing nothing and just savouring the luxury of that moment and the beautiful flavour of the cacao. So it's not something that I'm addicted to. I mean, you could take it away from me. I'd be a bit sad, but I'm not going to claw it back off you, But I do find it comforting because it gives me an opportunity to stop and indulge in something, and it's something that's nourishing and health supporting as well. I do it also with the liquid swats that comes off the Scottish suans that I make. So when I make the suans and I ferment the bits of the oat, there's a liquid on the top that ferments, and it creates a kind of a quite sour, tangy drink that you can heat up. And I heat it up often with like cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg and ginger. And then this is kind of like a mulled drink, like you'd have mulled wine. It's mulled swats. And I will sit with my hands around that in a mug, and I will really enjoy that. And that does a similar thing to me. It's me sitting down for a moment and enjoying the sensation and the luxury of that thing in my hands, that warm thing. So I do get the tea thing, definitely. And I think that perhaps that's a good definition of a kind of comfort food, the fact that with that tea, I take time to sit down and be still. And maybe when we come back from a field and we've been working all day, as you were describing earlier, with the bread and the cheese at the table with the soup, we're sitting down and we're savouring that moment. And therefore the food becomes naturally comforting because it's the moment that matters. It's that moment of nourishing and indulging in that luxury of sating a hunger or tasting the chocolate of a tea and enjoying it.
Yeah. And do you I know we're running out of time, but do you have specific, like with Gabriel, I just want to know, are you shaping specific environments with foods for him? Like, can you think of specific instances?
So I will often sit with him and have a tea, and I will make tea for both of us, and we will both sit down and drink it together. And then, when we have dinner, we have dinner at the table in a way that we're all together, and we take a moment before we eat our food to kind of connect with each other. And we'll be talking about what's on the plate. We'll be talking about the kind of the bits of the fat at lunchtime that I had on my plate. We'll be talking about the bread, and sometimes we'll have 2 different types of bread, and we'll be saying, well, do you remember you did that one, or which one do you prefer? Do you prefer this one? Should I make it different the next time? And so I'm nurturing an environment where he's been part of the food, and we create an environment where we stop and enjoy the food, and then the food creates a discussion as well. I think that's the kind of question you were asking me.
I feel like I just tell the kids, eat it. I don't care if you like it, eat it. But I should probably do a little more of that. No, I love that. I am sure that he will grow up, and wherever he is in the world, he'll have a cup of tea, and it will bring him comfort in that way.
Hope so.
Because it will evoke for him. I think food can be like language in that way. I heard or I read what an immigrant from Germany said once, where she said, living in my second language is hard because the word chair I have no memories of this word chair. And when she says, the German word, she remembers grandma's chair and mom's chair and sitting in a chair and how it feels to be in a chair, right? There's no association. So for Gabriel, he'll take his tea in a different country, in a different place, maybe with a different person or whatever, but tea will draw out that memory.
I hope so. And I kind of feel like, because I didn't have those sensations and those experiences as a child as I'm having them now, eating nourishing, health supporting, comforting food, I feel like when I take the moments to create them and share them with Gabriel or share them with Rob, I'm filling in a hole in my past and just slowly healing myself by creating something that I didn't have, but I'm building it now.
That's such a healthy way to think about it, and I hope that we can all use that with our comfort food and to create, accept, and enjoy the comfort food and the experiences that we're putting together for ourselves.
Yeah, amen. Amen. That's probably a good place to stop. I'm looking at my watch and thinking we've gone over an hour for sure.
All right, hour 15.
Right, we've gone over an hour. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, we'll have to pick this up in another way on another day.
Yeah. Okay, well, shall I finish by reading the little quote that I said I might read, because it's really quite nice.
Yes, close us.
Okay, so it's a quote from Marcel Proust from his book called La Recherche de Temps Perdu in French, but it's in English, thank goodness. It's quite short. And he's talking about the taste of a Madeleine biscuit dunked in tea. And he says, "No sooner had the warm liquid and the crumbs with it touched my palate than a shudder ran through my whole body, and I stopped, intent upon the extraordinary changes that were taking place. An exquisite pleasure had invaded my senses, but individual, detached, with no suggestion of its origin. And at once the vicissitudes of life had become indifferent to me, its disasters innocuous, its brevity illusory. This new sensation having had on me the effect which love has of filling me with a precious essence, or rather this essence was not in me, it was myself." I wanted to share that because I think it's beautiful. That's what it says. I haven't read the 4,000 pages, but apparently. So let's leave it at that, and I shall go upstairs and get some supper.
All right, and I'll go upstairs.
Yeah,
and have some
about
breakfast.
time. And you're going to be hungry, so you're really going to enjoy it.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm really going to be savoring it. I'm always hungry when I wake up. So,
go.
Okay, well, Alison, it's good chatting with you,
always.
and I'll see you.
Yeah,
see you soon.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Alison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.